Whoa, he has trouble with the snap, and the ball is free.
There goes Davis.
Oh, my God.
Davis is going to run it all the way back.
This is VSiN's College Football Betting Podcast.
Welcome in. It is VSiN's College Football Betting Podcast, and for maybe the only time, we'll go three wide on Monday evenings / Tuesday mornings in your feed. It'll be myself, Tim Murray, and Adam Burke, and then Mr. Youmans, Matt Youmans, will join us on Thursdays to break down the entire slate. But gentlemen, week 0 is here. We have some looks at some future plays as well. So let's jump right into it, just looking at big picture 2022, and you look at the futures market right now and pulling up DraftKings and pretty much similar everywhere else. Alabama plus 175, Ohio State 3-1, Georgia 4-1, and then drop off to Clemson, even further drop off to a team like A&M. When you look at the futures market, guys, is there anything outside of those top 3 that would intrigue you?
Not really, to be honest, because college football is not like college basketball. And Tim, you and I have talked about this before. In college hoops, you can find live long shots and triple-digit odds. We've done it in recent years. And with teams like Dayton and Texas Tech, you go down the list of teams you can get at 100-1, 200-1. That just does not happen in college football. I like Utah as a team from the outside that could sneak into the playoff. But you're looking at, 50-1 odds is the best you can find on Utah to win the whole thing, and that's if the Utes get to the playoff. They probably have to beat Ohio State and Alabama. Okay, good luck with that. 5-1 to even make the playoff, I don't think there's much or any value with even playing that. So maybe Adam Burke's got a long shot that he can dig up for you, but Utah is the best I can find, and I don't really see value in the numbers.
Yeah, I mean, look, I have Georgia 7.5-point favorite, better than Michigan in my power ratings, and that's the closest gap I have between any of the top 3 teams. So I agree with Matt. I really don't see anybody outside of Alabama, Ohio State, or Georgia winning the title. I do feel like maybe Oklahoma's a team that could crash that playoff party, because I do think pretty highly of Brent Venables and what he's going to have there with offensive coordinator Jeff Lebby. But again, like Matt said, you're kind of just betting on a team to make the playoff. You're not betting on any other team besides those top 3 to win it all.
And if you look back to last year, you look at Cincinnati, and if you had that ticket, I think it was as high as 14-1 to make the playoff. That's a great cash. But what happens? People say, well, you can hedge off. Well, they were, a 14-point underdog to Alabama? Mm-hmm. You could hedge off with Michigan. They were a double-digit underdog to Georgia, so there really aren't hedging opportunities when you assume, and I truly believe that the top 2 teams in Ohio State and Alabama are so far and beyond everybody else. Even Georgia. I think there is a pretty sizable gap between 1 and 2 this year, and then down to 3 to a team like Georgia. So, jumping into conference futures, and I don't know if you guys have fired on any when it comes to some conference titles, but I think this is where you can get a little more creative. And we'll start in the ACC, guys, because there's been a ton of buzz this preseason about NC State, Devin Leary coming back. I've heard this kind of crazy narrative. Well, their bowl game got canceled, so they're all fired up to head into this year. I don't know if I buy into that, but when you look at the ACC, Matt, is there a team that intrigues you? Personally, I don't have any play because I do think Clemson is the best team, and they get to host NC State. They get to host Miami. Mm-hmm. Maybe I could be intrigued in Miami because they're on the other side in the Coastal Division, but to me, I'm not that excited about NC State at plus 750 because they have to go to Clemson and beat the Tigers in order to get to the ACC title game.
Right, and the Wolfpack beat the Tigers last season. I think
in overtime.
11-point dogs in that game, and that Clemson offense was anemic early in the season. Clemson actually opened last season 0-7 against the spread, if you can believe that. I think it's got to be NC State or Miami. That's it. The 2 teams you mentioned. Devin Leary had, 35 TD passes, 5 interceptions last year. I was in San Diego for the Holiday Bowl, had bet NC State in that game against UCLA, was very confident I was going to be winning that bet that night. And
you were just as mad as the Wolfpack players.
I was, actually.
Because Matt doesn't get – I mean, that's true, though. You never get pissed off by any of your losses. I would – neither do I.
I was going to say, you're always very calm, cool,
very calm.
Never get too upset. Never too high or too low. I think NC State, Miami have to be the only 2 options.
Yeah, again, I agree with what Matt said. And I think that Miami, you can find them. They're plus 550 out there at DraftKings. I think that's a team that has a really good shot to win that other division.
Sure.
Certainly for Clemson, I mean, they are the favorite. And I think a lot of it really for Clemson, the projection of their season comes down to whether or not they go with Cade Klubnik at some point throughout the course of this season. Because they can win the ACC without going with him. But I think that he would definitely upgrade the ceiling of that team based on what we've seen from DJ Uiagalelei, last year specifically. But I think Miami, I started thinking about this a lot. Michigan obviously really overperformed last year. And I think a lot of it had to do with their coordinators, with offensive coordinator Josh Gaddis and then Mike McDonald, who winds up now going back to Baltimore to be the defensive coordinator. But I really like the idea of Josh Gaddis along with Tyler Van Dyke. I think this is a Miami offense that could be really, really good, much more efficient. I think Miami is a team that I'm as I'm leading up to the season, I'm starting to think much, much more highly of them.
Well, does it worry you at all if you backed Oregon over the years? I mean, Mario Cristobal pulls some rabbits out of his hat in losing just inexplicable games, losing to Stanford last year. So I understand the hype, and it's kind of like USC to me heading into this year. I think Lincoln Riley is a home run higher. I think Mario Cristobal is a home run higher, but it's year one. Is Miami ready to make that jump? Now, the caveat to that, to your point, Adam, I mean, they are in the Coastal Division. Who frightens you there? No one really. And they could lose that game to Clemson in November and still make the ACC championship. So I certainly wouldn't disagree with that. I just have questions with Miami and USC more so just because it feels like there's so much hype around these two hires when it is year one.
Right, absolutely. And look, to be fair, I mean, I think that when you kind of look at that Coastal Division, it sort of comes down to your thoughts on Pitt. How good do you think Pitt is going to be where they get Keaton Slovis from USC, but now they change offensive coordinators. They go with Frank Cignetti, who was at Boston College, and now Pitt's going to run the football. And they were a very inefficient rushing attack last year with offensive coordinator Mark Whipple, and they had Kenny Pickett. They didn't need to be efficient in the running game. But Narduzzi wants to play this physical brand of football, and maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, but I think it lowers Pitt's ceiling to play that style of game, which opens the door for Miami, even if they're not perfect, even if they do trip up, to still be the team that comes out of that division and likely plays Clemson or potentially North Carolina State.
Well, I think the conference this year that is the most wide open and maybe an opportunity to bet a long shot, no divisions in the Big 12. You look at Oklahoma as the betting favorite at plus 190 at DraftKings. Texas at plus 290. They've got a lot of hype. What is Quinn Ewers? Is he going to be as good as his 5-star ranking was coming out of the college ranks? Oklahoma State won this conference last year. Jimmy Knowles is gone. A lot of those pieces on defense are gone. Actually, Baylor won the conference. Excuse me. Oklahoma State just a couple inches shy. TCU, Kansas State, another team that's certainly gotten some hype. So this conference seems wide open. So, Matt, do you think there's anything out there right now worth a flyer to come out of the Big 12 in that futures market?
That's a good question. I actually think that Baylor's got a great shot. I don't like Texas. I've started to sour on Texas a little bit more because I've talked to an insider who's been at practices recently, and he says, don't believe the media hype. This team looks like crap. And he says there's problems on the offensive line, that Quinn Ewers hasn't looked that good in practice, and that the media reports are kind of covering up a lot of the warts that the people who are at practice are seeing every day. And I think Adam Burke and I are going to be on opposite sides of the Oklahoma bet. I thought the luck factor was on the Sooners' side last year. Oklahoma won 6 games, was decided by 7 points or fewer. And that's the most of any team in college football in a long time. And that was with Lincoln Riley calling the shots and Caleb Williams at quarterback. I don't know how good Brent Venables is going to be as a head coach. If you know anything about his background, he's a very volatile personality. There was a reason he didn't want to be a head coach for a long time. He kind of got forced into this Oklahoma job because Bob Stoops and everybody wanted an Oklahoma guy to take over the program. So Venables, you can't turn down the money. He comes back to Norman, takes the job. I do think this offense is going to be explosive. It always is at Oklahoma. And you got Marvin Mims at receiver, Dylan Gabriel from UCF at quarterback to transfer. Offense isn't going to be a problem. Venables will eventually get the defense into shape. But the Big 12, there's so many coin flip type of games. And you asked me, if there's a future you can bet. I did not bet any future in the Big 12 because I think it's a little bit of a toss-up, and I just am not sold on any one team where I can find some odds value here and say, yeah, that's the bet I want to make. Oklahoma has road games against TCU, Iowa State, West Virginia, and Texas Tech. Not the toughest in the world, but I think a 10-win season's way too much to ask. That's why I played under 9.5 on the win total. It wouldn't surprise me if the Sooners lose at Nebraska, or if they fall at home to Kansas State, Baylor, or Oklahoma. If they lose to Texas on a neutral, I think it's going to be an 8-4, 9-3 type of team. Kind of a log jam at the top of the Big 12. And no, I did not make a bet on any specific team to win the conference. Did you, Adam?
No, I haven't. But, I think this is such an interesting conference because a lot of the teams in the middle are going through a significant amount of transition, right? You've got a new head coach at TCU. You've got a new head coach at Texas Tech. You've got the defensive coordinator situation at Oklahoma State. And you've got an Iowa State team that lost a ton of returning production from last year. So this conference is kind of volatile in terms of the middle and the bottom of it, where I know a lot of people like Kansas State. I'm not so sold. I'm not an Adrian Martinez guy. So I think the Wildcats probably
the mayor of Lincoln, you're not a big fan of?
No.
I mean, he was there for like a decade and a half.
And I think to that
wasn't
point,
Bo Pelini his head coach at one point?
Probably. I'm sure he was. Isn't Adrian Martinez like 40 now? But look, I think to that point, not to go off into a different conference, but you look at what's happening with the Nebraska line this week, and it's just running out, for week 0 here. So I think that maybe that's kind of an indicator of just expecting the Cornhuskers to be better without Adrian Martinez with some of the changes that they've made. So I think it's kind of interesting to kind of look the middle of the conference more than the top of it, because I do agree with Matt. Texas is not back yet, as far as I'm concerned. Defensively, they still have a lot to work out. And if the offense is going to be inefficient, as Matt mentioned, then that really puts a lot of pressure on the defense. So I think Oklahoma almost kind of by default looks like the team that should take care of business here, where I think Venables does elevate that defense. And I do like the fact that Levy, the offensive coordinator, and Dylan Gabriel have worked together and have played in that up-tempo offense before.
Yeah, I put a little on over 9. I wouldn't have played 9.5 over. So I think, if it was 9.5 when I played at Matt, I probably would have joined you on the under. But I looked at this team more as the ceiling to be 10 as opposed to the floor being 8. But I think the biggest question for me with that win total, to me, it comes down to the Nebraska game. If they lose at Nebraska, this win total for me is in trouble, and the win total for Matt is in great shape sitting there. So, just bouncing around Big Ten, obviously heavy favorite Ohio State. You look at the the SEC, heavy favorite Alabama. Those two conferences, and we'll get into our favorite win totals. We'll also obviously take a look at week 0 here as we go on through the podcast. But Big Ten, SEC, anything jump out at you? Because, I don't know if I speak for both of you. I'm so high on both Alabama and Ohio State. I wouldn't play anything. Maybe if you look at a division, if you want to look at the SEC East with, whether it be Kentucky or Tennessee, could they dethrone Georgia, who's a massive favorite there? Or you look at the Big Ten West with all of the question marks, Wisconsin, Iowa. Some people like Purdue. I know, Matt, you do not. But anything in either one of those conferences that excites you?
Well, as far as the Big Ten West, it wouldn't surprise me if any one of 5 teams won that thing, and Purdue included. But I don't think there's much separation. Usually in the past, you could say just pencil in Wisconsin as the favorite. I can't do that this year with Graham Mertz at quarterback. I know the Badgers are going to run the ball. Their offensive line and running attack is going to control everything. It's not going to be on the quarterback. Graham Mertz had 10 TD passes, 11 interceptions last year. For a former 5-star recruit, he's been incredibly disappointing. Wisconsin lost a lot of talent off that defense too. So, and don't forget, Iowa won the Big Ten West last year. Mm-hmm. There was a 3-way tie for second with Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Purdue. Now Nebraska steps up into the mix. I don't even think the teams at the bottom of that division are that bad in Illinois and Northwestern. I think they're going to be better. I'll just summarize this by saying I bet Utah to win the Pac-12 at plus 250. I think Utah's the best team there, not USC, which is overhyped, and we don't know if that USC defense is going to be any good. Plus, Utes get the Trojans in Salt Lake City, and that's a big scheduling advantage to have that game at home. In the Mountain West, I actually like Fresno State a lot. I think it's Fresno State or Air Force, not Boise. So when you talk about the Big Ten or the SEC, no, I can't find a team that's going to knock off Alabama. I can't find a team that's going to knock off Ohio State. I'm looking at other conferences. I know Adam Burke loves to handicap smaller conferences too. I think you find more value in conferences like the Mountain West or, maybe even the Pac-12
Anything, Adam?
than you do in the Big Ten or SEC.
Yeah, Matt's right, because it's a higher variance environment in the group of 5 conferences where, obviously you've got Ohio State, Alabama that are so much better than everybody else in their respective conferences. Clemson, the last several years, has been as well. So you have to look towards the group of 5 ranks. And I think a team like Air Force at 4-1 to win the Mountain West is a pretty decent bet. I mean, I have Air Force projected for almost double-digit wins. So over 8.5 is one of my favorite season win total bets. I know we're going to elaborate on those a little bit further later on down the show, but I think Air Force at 4-1, and like Matt, I think they play Fresno State. So if you wanted to take a piece of Fresno State, you're free rolling in that title game as far as I'm concerned. I think down in the Sun Belt, the Sun Belt is a fascinating conference for this season because the East is really, really stacked. You've got App State, you've got Coastal Carolina, Georgia State. You bring in Old Dominion now as well. You bring in Marshall, but there's some value to pick a team coming out of the West, where I think Louisiana could drop off a little bit without Billy Napier, without their program all-time leading passer and Levi Lewis. It feels to me like a team like South Alabama could sneak in there. So you could find them at 18-1, 20-1 to win the Sun Belt. Do I think they do it? No. But if you get them live in the title game, then you run into a scenario where maybe you can take a live money line on whoever comes out of the East and guarantee yourself some profit, something like that.
Yeah, I took a flyer on Nebraska to win the Big Ten West. Look at the schedule. Home game against Wisconsin on November 19th. That Black Friday game against Iowa, they led by, 3 touchdowns last year. But until they win a close game, I don't know what we're going to get. I mean, I think Mark Whipple, their new OC, kind of said as much. We have to win. We have to know what it's like to win a close game. So that was more of a smaller play. But let's jump into those win totals. And I know a lot of these, Matt, you've been firing away for a while. We gave out our best plays in our college football betting guide. But a couple that maybe haven't moved all that much. We can get into our favorite plays that may have moved significantly and teams that we're pulling for, just as we can kind of keep track of them over the football season. I've got a handful. Matt, I know you do too. So what are some of the biggest ones that are your favorite ones that you have fired on?
Yeah, I put out 10 win total plays here on VSiN, and I've bet a couple more since then, but I'll give you a few I really like. I like Kansas State over 6.5 a lot. And I know Adam Burke, his point about Adrian Martinez is correct, but sometimes a quarterback like that, who is talented, you can get the best out of him with a change of scenery and a new coach. Chris Kleiman's a great coach at K-State. Nobody ever talks about him, but he's a great coach. He's got Deuce Vaughn behind him, one of the best running backs in the country. They got a lot of talent coming back on that offensive line. Actually, they're going to be strong on the offensive and defensive lines. I think K-State, by the way, I'll lay this out for you. When you look at K-State's schedule, the win total is 6.5. At this point, it's been bet up a little bit to where you got to lay about $1.50 to bet over. Kansas State opens against South Dakota, Missouri, Tulane, and should be 3-0 right off the bat. Texas Tech is the 5th game. I expect this team to get off to a hot start. In the Big 12, like I said, there are a lot of coin flip games, so I like K-State to get to 7 or 8 wins. And don't forget, 2 years ago, Tim, it was misguided hype and money, but there was a lot of hype and money on Adrian Martinez in the Heisman Trophy market. Do you remember that 2 summers ago?
Oh, yeah.
It was, like I said, it was misguided. But still, that's how talented the kid is. There were a lot of people buying into it. Can Chris Kleiman bring that back? Was there something about the
Colin
offensive...
Klein as new OC?
Yeah. Is there something about the Nebraska coaching staff that maybe was holding him back too? I think that's fair to ask. And that's why I think the Adrian Martinez thing could be a positive for K-State. Also, I played LSU over 6.5. Brian Kelly's got a couple of quarterbacks he can win with. You and I have talked about this before, Tim. His last 4 years at Notre Dame, he was the betting favorite 41 times, and he won 40 times.
The last time he lost as a betting favorite was the regular season finale against Stanford in 2017.
Yeah. He doesn't
lose as a favorite.
Yeah, he doesn't lose games he's supposed to win.
Yeah.
He's got 2 quarterbacks he can win with here. LSU brought a lot of talent in the transfer portal, and I think 6.5 is a low number for this program. If a lot of people don't like Brian Kelly, they think he's a prick, and so be it.
He's a good coach, though.
He's a very good coach, and he's a really good quarterback coach. And I wouldn't be surprised if LSU wins 8 games. I think over 6.5 is a bargain. And a lot of times, and here's what's different about college football when you handicap it this year. Don't worry so much about returning starters. The team's only got 5 back on offense or 4 back on defense. With the transfer portal, everything changes. This is free agency in college football. Brian Kelly's bringing in guys who are ready to play now. I think the turnaround at LSU is going to be quick. Also, let's go Ole Miss over 7.5, and I like this one a lot. Lane Kiffin's another one of those guys that people don't want to bet on because they don't like him. He's kind of like the Patrick Reed of college football. But
That's a good comparison.
but and maybe it's not a great comparison because Kiffin actually is really good at what he does.
This is the golf college football crossover podcast section of
he's just very unlikable sometimes. But Kiffin, he lost. And here's the thing, again, only 5 starters back in offense. But don't worry about that because the transfer portal, the teams that did the best were probably USC number 1 and Mississippi number 2. And he's bringing in a ton of talent. That defense got a lot better last season. Matt Corral's gone, but Jackson Dart, the new quarterback, I think in the next couple of years is going to be better than Matt Corral. He was a top player in the state of Utah 2 years ago. If Lincoln Riley had not gone to USC, Jackson Dart would be the future QB at USC. Kiffin can bring out the best in him. The schedule, how about this? Ole Miss starts against Troy, Central Arkansas, at Georgia Tech, Tulsa at home, Kentucky at home, at Vandy. The win total, and then Auburn at home. The win total is 7.5. There's a decent chance that Ole Miss is going to be 7-0 by the middle of October.
Well, and I'll jump in
How
there.
can you not like that?
And I'll jump in there with Ole Miss and give you one of my favorite win total unders, Georgia Tech.
Yeah.
Georgia Tech under 3.5. It was at even money. You could have got some plus money at once upon a time. But you mentioned they have to play Ole Miss. Georgia Tech also has to play Central Florida on the road as a 2-touchdown underdog. They closed the season against Georgia. So there's 3 losses right there for Georgia Tech. They bring in a new offensive coordinator in Chip Long who had some success in Notre Dame, but people wanted him out at Tulane. The schedule's rough. They get a Western Carolina team that they should win that game. They play Duke. They play Virginia. But I'm having a hard time finding 4 wins for that program. Oh, by the way, their best player, talking about teams gaining from the transfer portal, Matt. Well, how about your best player leaving? And that would be Jahmyr Gibbs, who goes to Alabama. I mean, they were crushed. I'll get to another team that was crushed in the transfer portal in a little bit on a win total I like. But, looking at Georgia Tech, Adam, I don't know what you projected them at, but it's hard to see 4 wins for the Rambling Wreck. Just when you go down the slate, I heard a couple of people saying, Georgia Tech, they could win 4 or 5 games. And then when you just go through the schedule, hard to find it. Are they going to win on the road at Virginia Tech? I don't know. That's a pretty tall task to ask there. So, Georgia Tech, one of my favorite underplays.
You know what? Quickly, 2 of the most popular underplays, and I like them too. Colorado under 3.5. You're going to see 2.5 out there now in that number at most places. That's been pounded in Georgia Tech under.
Yeah, Colorado's one that I also played. I have them projected for 1.72 wins in using my power ratings and then converting that to spreads, looking at implied win probability. It's going to be a very long year for the Buffaloes. Georgia Tech 2.71 wins for me in my projections, so definitely well under that market number. As far as some of the ones that I like, I mentioned already, Air Force over 8.5. I love this Air Force team. I love Troy Calhoun. They're 26-8 straight up in their last 34 games, and that includes that weird COVID-altered season and all of that. They've had 2 double-digit winning seasons otherwise. I expect them to get very close to that this year, and I do think that Boise State's probably due for a little bit of a drop-off now with some of the coaching turnover that they've had. I just think that the rest of the Mountain West is going to kind of catch up to them a little bit. Another over that I like, speaking of kind of that mountain area, Utah over 9. I have Utah projected for double-digit wins. I think they're clearly the best team in the Pac-12. I have them a bigger favorite than what the market does in that game against USC that Matt alluded to earlier. So Air Force over, Utah over. Another over I like, as you mentioned, I'm kind of a small conference type of guy. South Alabama. I really, really like South Alabama. You talk about the transfer portal. They've got great depth and experience at quarterback. Kane Womack is a second-year head coach who has been a very, very successful defensive coordinator at a couple of different stops. And Major Applewhite is an accomplished offensive coordinator. So I kind of expected South Alabama to be better last year, but Jake Bentley wasn't as good as I thought. I know they lose Jalen Tolbert, which is a big loss for them, but I still think that's a team that could surprise there in the Sun Belt West. And as far as a few unders, staying in the Sun Belt, Georgia Southern, under 4.5.
Not a Clay Helton guy?
No. I'm not a Clay Helton guy when they go from running the triple option to now all of a sudden throwing the ball around the yard.
It's worked out for Georgia Tech really well.
Exactly. So that's one where Georgia Southern's also stuck in the Sun Belt East, which is just a brutal division to play in. I also like Navy under 4.5. I think Navy is just Look, the thing about Navy is now that they're in a conference and teams see them regularly every single year, they've been so much more prepared for the option that Ken Niumatalolo and his coaching staff, they just don't really know what to do to try and make adjustments. So Navy under 4.5, then the last under, you talk about teams that play a tough schedule that aren't very good, Rice. So Rice doesn't get to play FIU in Conference USA play, which is definitely a punishment for them. Their non-conference games, they play at USC, at Houston. They host Louisiana, who, again, I think will be down, but they're still a better team than the Owls are. Under 3.5, minus 130, I think is still a bargain on them. I have them about 2 wins.
Yeah, I'll give you a couple, and certainly, juice has moved a little bit. You can still get Colorado under minus $2. And Matt, you can I know you spoke to this when you bet over, Ohio State? Was it minus 220 or so?
I bet Alabama over minus 225. I didn't bet the Ohio State over, but I don't disagree with it. I don't see Ohio State losing 2 games. I don't see Bama losing 2 games. I rarely say this, but lay the 225, 250, whatever. I don't see Colorado winning 4 games.
And that's the thing, too. I would lay the $2. I know, Matt, I think you wrote it up much earlier. You could have got cheaper juice. But, you look at that. They play 11 Power 5 games. Their lone non-Power 5 game is against Air Force on the road where, they're a 2-touchdown underdog. They lost their 2 starting cornerbacks that will be starting in the Pac-12. Blackman to USC. Gonzalez is a player. He's at Oregon now. They're leading rushers at Michigan State. 2 of their top receivers have transferred out. Their safety is going to be at TCU. And last year, if you look at their 4 wins last year, 1 was an FCS game against Northern Colorado. The other 3 were all at home. 1 came in overtime against Oregon State. Another came against Washington, where they were outgained by 250 yards. All 3 of those games are on the road this year. I just don't see how Carl Durrell's team, finds another win, finds 4 wins. And they hired Mike Stanford Jr. I don't know how Mike Stanford Jr. keeps getting jobs. He got fired from Minnesota. He was a disaster as a head coach at Western Kentucky. I know once upon a time he was a hot commodity, leaving Boise State, going to Notre Dame. But under for Colorado, joining the group there. A couple other I talked about on the show, and Matt gave me some grief about it. UCF. We talked it out on the show. Sean was leaning towards it. You look at the schedule for UCF. You get Louisville with the rest advantage, a Friday night game at home. You do not play Houston. You get Cincinnati at home. You only have 5 road games. You play Georgia Tech, who's, they'll be a 2-touchdown favorite over that. John Reese Plumlee was named the starter. And then the final one that I liked was Maryland over 5.5. Some 6s out there. It all kind of comes down to the SMU game for me, guys. If they beat SMU at home, where they're a slight favorite, I think Mike Loxley's team is talented enough offensively to be able to beat the likes of Indiana, Northwestern, and then getting one of these, Purdue, Michigan State, both at home, or Rutgers at home. So I do like the Terps to get back to bowl eligibility. All right, that'll do it for the win totals. Each week, obviously, we will take a look in depth at the games that are on the slate. This week, of course, a very minimal slate. 7 games between FBS teams, a couple other FCS games. You can find those lines, I think, in some exotic locations. But looking at the 7 FBS matchups, Matt, these numbers have all been picked and dissected for weeks. They've been up for a while. You've seen tons of line movement, right? You've seen New Mexico State go from a 2-touchdown underdog now down to a 9-point underdog. You've seen Vanderbilt go as a 2-point favorite to an 8-point favorite. Nebraska from 10.5 to almost 2 touchdowns. So right now, Matt, that's what makes it tricky about week 0. How do you normally go about betting these first couple of weeks of the season when these lines have been up for so long?
Well, if I like an underdog, I will probably let's say you like New Mexico State early. I thought that number was too high. I wish you would have pulled the trigger early. I didn't think that line would move as fast as it did. It was 16.5. I didn't bet that until it was 12. I got New Mexico State plus 12. Now it's down to 9. I can't make that bet at 9. I hesitated to make the bet at 12 because I'd lost 4.5 points off the opener, but the opener didn't last long. You know what's weird about this week 0? You can make a case for Northwestern. You can make a case for UTEP. You can make a case for Vanderbilt, UConn, New Mexico State. I think when you look at that as a card, you have to question what you're doing with your life. Right? Is that the way you want to start the season?
Well, I mean, thank goodness, for the fine folks of Dublin, Ireland, they get an opportunity to see a pair of 3-win Big Ten teams going head to
How
head.
about that? And that's the high-profile game.
That's the big game. That's the game on Fox. But hey, and by the way, Nebraska won that game by 49 last year. Their only win in conference play.
Right.
But no, let's start with that game because it is the big game, quote unquote. It's up to 13.5. It may touch 14. I am staying as far away from that game as possible.
It's already hit 14 today at Caesars. I took 14 with the Purple Cats.
I mean, I feel like you have to.
There's the hype on the Cornhuskers is over the top, I think, a little bit. Scott Frost, 15-29 in his 4 years. Yeah, he brought in 44 new players, including 22 transfers. Casey Thompson, a quarterback, is the headliner, 24 TD passes and 10 starts for Texas last season. But still, these are all new guys. This is a new offense. Mark Whipple, the OC, came over from Pitt. It's basically a bunch of new players and a new system, and you're traveling to Ireland and laying 2 touchdowns. I think that's a lot to ask against a good coach. And Pat Fitzgerald, he's going to have a team that's better than last season. The Wildcats won 3 games. They failed to score more than 14 points in any of the final 6. They were blown out by Illinois at the end of the year. That's how bad it was. But Ryan Helinski, the former South Carolina transfer, is back at quarterback. Evan Hull was a 1,000-yard rusher. Here's the thing. Fitzgerald's going to put a decent defense out there on the field. You know that. I don't think Nebraska's going to go up and down the field on the Purple Cats. The previous 4 meetings between these teams were decided by 1 score. So last year's blowout, I think, was an anomaly. That had a lot to do with how bad the Purple Cats were at the time. A lot of times Pat Fitz has surprises up his sleeve when expectations are really low. I just think this number's gotten out of control. I said this week, I put Northwestern out as a pick at plus 13, but I said I will not bet this until it hits 14. I know it's going to hit 14 because all the Nebraska hype, and it did hit 14 today, so I took it.
All right, so you wait till 14. It popped at Caesars on Thursday, and it might certainly come Saturday. Might be around 14 again. Adam, when you look at this slate, whether it be a total, some of those totals have moved a ton. So yeah, it is. New Mexico State, Nevada, I think has moved 5 points to the under.
That's sharp, very sharp money on the under in the New Mexico State game, by the way.
Yeah. So, but you're looking at some spots have gotten down to 8.5, and it just feels like it's going to keep moving. Nevada, by the way, just a quick aside. I think Bill Conley pointed this out. Since he's been tracking production with S&P Plus, it is the lowest production he's ever tracked. Only 22% returning for Nevada. Jay Norvell leaves for Colorado State, basically brings the entire team with them. Any other semblance of talent on that roster has gone elsewhere. So I think Nevada is certainly a team to look to fade, but I think it feels like it's a lot here week 1 against, a New Mexico State team, Adam. I don't know where you have them power rated, but, most people you look at 130, 131. I mean, they are one of, if not the worst FBS team in college football.
Yeah, New Mexico State is 130th for me in my power rating, so the second worst team in college football. The total move is really the interesting thing to me about that game because Nevada, as you mentioned, Jay Norvell goes to Colorado State, so the air raid is no longer going to be run there in Reno. They want to play kind of more of a physical style of football. They want to run the ball more. And that's exactly what this move on the total is indicating to us. And, to your point, not only do they not have a lot of returning production, they're completely changing schemes. So things are going to be inefficient to begin with. But now they go with an altogether different offense. And I understand why New Mexico State's taking money. I understand why the under's taking money in that game as well. One that I think is kind of intriguing here is actually UConn and Utah State. And I'm not laying the 26.5, 27 pregame. My line's actually 24 on this game for what it's worth. But if this is close in the first half, you've got to think UConn will wear down in the second half. This is not a team accustomed to going to playing in elevation. They lost their defensive coordinator. He took a leave of absence like a week ago. So that kind of tells you about the state of the program right now. If this is a close game at halftime, I will take Utah State second half because I just expect Utah State to kind of get things going. They're a well-coached team with Blake Anderson, and I would anticipate that UConn just kind of falls off a little bit. So that's sort of my approach, where these lines have been up for a long period of time. And as you mentioned, a lot of the equity has been kind of dragged out of these, or we've seen it kind of taken out here early in the week. So you can look to live bet things. You can look for second half opportunities, stuff like that. You think about, some of these teams that may be going and playing in hot weather in week 1. You expect them to kind of slow down in the second half, stuff like that. So I think, looking at Utah State for a second half play, the only thing I took full game this week was I laid the 10 with Illinois earlier in the week against Wyoming. My number's 13.5 there. And the reality is it's hard to win by margin when you've got a low totaled game of 44 like we do here. Usually you want to be on the side plus the points with a low total. But in this spot, these two teams kind of have a similar mentality and a similar mindset. The difference is Illinois is just going to be bigger. They're just going to be probably a stronger team. And I also like Tommy DeVito there. I think Tommy DeVito is a pretty good fit for the Illini, who I actually have power rated a little bit higher than the market. So I laid the 10 in that game, and now it's out to 11.5.
And, Matt, you talked about transfers. Wyoming, another team, they got rated. Their best player went to Texas. Unfortunately, Isaiah Nayer, tore his ACL down there at Texas, so he won't be able to contribute. But another team, Bill Conley pointed this out, 35% of their production returning. So, when you look at that, Matt, has that number gotten too far away with Illinois? Last year we did see them. They were prepared week 1, right? They beat Nebraska as a 7-point dog, won that game by a touchdown. Is Illinois laying 11 too rich for your blood right now?
No, and this is the second year in a row I bet on Illinois and against Nebraska in the first week. Did it last year.
It worked out well for us.
It did. It did work out well.
And then UTSA, week 1? You just jump back on the other side and went with the Roadrunners.
How clumsy did the Cornhuskers look in that game last year in Champaign? I laid the 10 here, too. I talked about this early in the week with Mitch Moss and Paul Howard in the morning. Here's Brett Bielema. He understands how to win in the Big Ten. He's built a big, imposing offensive line. He's got his top 3 running backs returning. Chase Brown's one of those guys. If you remember, Brown rushed for 223 yards in that Illinois upset of Penn State last year. I think the difference here is going to be the Illinois offensive line is going to overpower and wear down a smaller Wyoming front in the second half, and that Wyoming defense is not going to be able to withstand really what I think is a big class difference between the Mountain West and the Big Ten. Craig Bohl, I have a lot of respect for him as coach of the Cowboys, but this might be the worst team he's had in 9 years. I think Illinois should win this game by 2 or 3 touchdowns.
All right, last one. It will be a glorious sight as we degenerate college football fans get to enjoy a game in Hawaii.
Love it.
10:30.
Always look forward to that.
10:30 Eastern. I'm wearing the shirt today. There's always a game in Hawaii. 10:30 CBS Sports Network. Sit down, get your popcorn ready to watch the future best football team in college football, Vanderbilt. That's straight from their coach's mouth at SEC Media Days. Go up against the pride of Hawaii, Timmy Chang. Has this number gotten out of control, guys? At some point, there has to be buyback. And I was actually talking to Chris Andrews a little bit before jumping on here, and he said, I kind of like Hawaii. And I know a lot of people out there, they're power rated. I'm curious what yours is, Adam, around 3.5. There was some early action, very early on Vanderbilt when it opened 2.5. But now we're sitting north of a touchdown. It's Vanderbilt, folks. And I know Timmy Chang and company, they lost Cordero. He's at San Jose State now. They lost a lot of pieces there. So it's kind of we don't know what to expect from Hawaii. But my God, Vanderbilt laying 8 on the road? Are we really?
Well, like
are we
said,
there?
You don't know what to expect from Hawaii, but a lot of times, in week 1 when you're betting these, you're a little bit in the dark,
right,
and you're hoping you're just trying to make an educated guess. So I know why Chris Andrews kind of likes Hawaii. He went out to lunch yesterday with Nick Bogdanovich and Richie Baccellieri, and one of those guys made this game pick 'em, the other made Hawaii -2. And now it's Vandy -8.5. It's 8.5 at DraftKings.
Yeah.
And I think Chris has got a similar number around Pick'em. I made the number Vandy -3. I think Hawaii's a complete mystery team. We don't know what we're going to get from Timmy Chang here early in the season. All reports were it was going to be a run-and-shoot offense. Now, I've talked to the Hawaii play-by-play guy, and he says, it's not exactly going to be a run-and-shoot. It's an offense that's kind of hard to describe. Cameron Cooper, a transfer from Washington State, was supposed to be the quarterback. Apparently now he's not the starting quarterback. It's Braden Schrager, who played a little bit last year for the Warriors. So I think even a weak SEC team should be able to outclass Hawaii. But I'm going to go with the home dog here, just based on the number. I'll try to grab 8.5 if it comes back again. If not, I'll just take the 8. But here, Hawaii last year is a home dog. By the way, they're playing on that small field.
With fans.
Yeah, and it's going to be, I think, maybe 12,000 fans, so it's kind of an intimate setting. And last year, on that same field, Hawaii upset Fresno State and Colorado State and covered against San Jose and San Diego State. Hawaii's been a good home underdog. And I think the atmosphere is going to be great because people on the islands are fired up that Timmy Chang's back to be the head coach. He might not have the talent. It might get blown off the field, but that's a gamble you take. And I think when you're a handicapper, too, you have to say, hey, look, smart guys are making this number around Pick'em, and it's 8.5. I have to take the 8.5.
Yeah, my number was initially 2 on this one, and then I decided, well, maybe I'm off on Hawaii. Maybe my power rating on Hawaii is off. So I bumped it a couple points, and I thought, okay, well, Vanderbilt -4, it's a little bit of a stretch based on my original numbers, but that seems like it's probably okay. And then it just blew right through a touchdown and went all the way up to 8.5. So, like Matt, it would be Hawaii or nothing for me. There's no way to trust Vanderbilt, who, look, last year they played at Colorado State. It was their furthest game out west since 2003 when they played in Fort Worth against TCU. Now they're going all the way to Honolulu in week 0, where they're going to play what effectively amounts to about a 9:30 start time for them in terms of Central Time. So there's no way I could lay. I can't have an expectation for Vanderbilt most weeks, let alone in a situation such as this.
Yeah, it's year 2 for Clark Lee as the head coach down there. He lost his defensive coordinator to Michigan. Their 2 wins last year, that Colorado State game you mentioned, they won by 3. Colorado State was an absolute disaster with the Dazio, and then they eked out a win as a 2-touchdown favorite against UConn at home. They also lost to an FCS team by 20 to start the season last year. So I don't know how you can lay 8 with Vanderbilt on the road. I totally agree with you, Matt. It is a bit of a mystery, but I took the 8.5 at Circa earlier this week. It's just out of principle. It's like,
and I think that's the question. Is 8.5 the peak for Hawaii in this game? Is
It
this
might
line
not
done
be.
going up?
I
would
it
think
is
so.
because there was a service. You probably know who it is. There was a service that gave out Vandy -6.5 as a play on Wednesday, and that's why this number shot up. A lot of bettors jumping on that, following the steam, and that's why that number went up. Clark Lee said, quote, "We know in time Vanderbilt football will be the best program in the country."
right.
What the hell is he talking about then? That's your guy from Notre Dame.
That's my guy.
Huh?
Very good defensive coordinator. Might be a bit delusional as now a head coach there at Vanderbilt. All right, so I'll put in Hawaii plus 8.5. Matt, you're going to take the points with the Purple Cats at 14 or higher. And Adam, anything you're looking at week 0, more in-game?
Yeah, I think the in-game angle with Utah State, if it comes to fruition, is something to look at. And I think Illinois at 11 is still okay. I mean, I took it at 10. It's nice to have kind of the protection of a potential push, especially with, again, a low-totaled game. But, for me, a lot of it is just kind of fact-finding. I spent most of my summer doing a lot of baseball prep, or doing a lot of baseball work, I should say. So I got to the college football prep a little bit late. Some of the win totals had moved and things of that sort. So, a lot of this is just kind of gathering information, being a sponge, soaking it up, seeing where these lines are moving, seeing what, as Matt mentioned, what some of the influential groups are doing, what they're releasing, what they're putting out, kind of filing some of those things away so that you can either get into the market at the right time or so that you can know, what the important groups are thinking about these teams.
Well, we will be with you each and every week, 3 times a week. We're going to have a special on Sunday when the lines are released. That'll be in your feed, the VSiN College Football Betting Podcast. Every Monday night, Tuesday morning in your feed, myself and Adam Burke will be breaking down early line moves, some mid-major games, group of 5 games, and then myself and Matt every Thursday afternoon will be breaking it down. So we'll be with you all throughout the college football season. And once again, to quote Matt Youmans, when you look at this card and you're deciding whether or not to bet on these games, sometimes you have to determine what are you doing with your life. But we're degenerate college football fans.
It looks like a hound's breakfast, Tim.
Brian Blessing.
Much better week 1, a good appetizer week 0, a good appetizer for this program. Once again, the VSiN College Football Betting Podcast. Tell a friend, tell 10, please. Matt Youmans, Adam Burke, I'm Tim Murray. We'll be back with you next week getting ready for a much better slate that is not a dog's breakfast next week leading into Labor Day. This has been the VSiN College Football Betting Podcast.